Hi, good morning. Hoping that today is a great day for all of us. We've had a lot of recent events lately coming up and personal events lately that are likely making it seem like the world is going to hell. Who hasn't had this thought? Throughout time, throughout any generations, I think that what I'm realizing is when they say history repeats itself, I think that we are creatures of such habit as a species that we must remember these important pieces of the lessons. If things are becoming forgotten in time, the lessons still ring true. Something that I was thinking about is history. A lot of history lately. Went on an incredible adventure recently over this weekend. And it was absolutely just beautiful to me because I have to admit, I have not given much positive energy towards my history or towards our history as a collective. There are a lot of things about history that I have enjoyed over time. But when I was in school, when I was young, I'm talking young, I was in elementary school, middle school, high school area. I have to as I'm going back to my former self to understand why didn't I see the value at that time? Part of the reason why I couldn't recognize what beautiful gifts were hiding in the stories of the past. Being so involved in the present, being more involved with my future as my younger self, to be able to think to the past and to understand the value of that as such a young person, perhaps it was because I could not fathom what it means to learn these lessons. Perhaps I was just bored because the people who were delivering this information to me, their communication styles and things like that made it difficult to keep interest. I see that a lot with kids who think that they're bad at a certain subject, or they just can't. And the thing is, I also held this belief about math, and I am guilty as heck of saying those words. I'm bad at math. I just thought that I could never be good at math because I did not learn at the same pace or whatever as the people around me, and therefore concluded early on that I must just not be able to do this. And part of what that did throughout the remainder of my early education and even into college was tell me, solidify the belief inside that I can't do this. I couldn't even absorb the information. I couldn't receive the information. I couldn't comprehend it because I had this mental block right in front of me that would not allow it. I was more solidified in the belief that I was bad at it than in the belief that maybe I can do this. Therefore, I had closed so hard to kind of preserve the ego within that was fearing the damage of embarrassment or failure or what have you. And I think the same thing may apply to history or any subject, but I think even what's more important is our ability to comprehend is not something you can just click on, click off. The way that people receive information and how they understand it is so variable between people, across people. There's so much that goes into someone's ability to truly understand. So first, we must remember, every single person here has an absolutely unique perspective on what they're witnessing in their life. They are making observations, they're taking in information, and there's so many steps to this as well. Are you able to receive the information? If someone is deaf, if someone is blind, they're literally, their physiology does not allow for the incoming information in that format. Okay? It is not that they can't comprehend what the meaning is underneath. It's just that they are not able to receive that information. Therefore, already they if it is only that one format and they are incapable of like taking that in, their receptors to that format are not functional, so in those times it would be easier, I think, for us as people to see some tangible evidence, to say, oh, this person can't receive this information in that way. Let's transform the format to make it deliverable. Let's accommodate this person's receptive style. Perhaps if we deliver it in words versus audio, perhaps if we deliver it in images versus whatever, So in school, teachers are amazingly able to provide a variety of formats for students, because we understand learning styles are different. I remember hearing at some point about learning styles. And I just heard, some people are more visual learners, some people are more experiential, more hands-on, that kind of thing. And honestly, I do not believe that people have one set learning style. And I think that the hands-on aspect, the reason why okay, let me back it up just a little bit. Okay, when beginning something totally unknown, how do we receive? How do we interpret when we don't have a lot of history or basis to go from? The way that we comprehend anything is really taking in some new incoming information and kind of referencing our collective information that we have stored in our internal libraries or collections of knowledge. We carry this stuff with us all the time, and when new information presents itself, it runs a quick scan, and anything that is similar is going to highlight within that knowledge body and present itself to us. So we're immediately able to reference the similar things or something that sparks in response to this new incoming info. And what happens is, in reference to that knowledge body, if nothing is matching, it's less likely that we're going to be able to have those gates open to be like, yeah, give me something totally random and new and different. Typically, when it's unknown, there is some level of resistance because it's a cautious protection of our own. When you don't know what's next, sometimes something really bad could be coming. Sometimes it could be amazing, but we won't know that. So we can think of our pre-existing understandings and imagine, based on those things or what we've seen other people do or anything, what will happen. And that assumption is also layered through the filters of our own perception, mood, physiological state, etc. Also to take into the consideration the situation at hand, because it provides a lot of context for us to build on. So when something's unknown, there is a lot of resistance because it isn't what they have done. It isn't what they understand. And so the ideas about learning and new information, it goes deeper than just how is this information delivered? Why can't you understand? People are getting so frustrated because it seems like there's such a disconnect or misunderstanding. And a lot of times it comes back to discussion on communication styles or, that kind of thing. But I'm just trying to say that if you've had experience in your life where you struggled to take in this kind of some new format of information, it might be a good it might be a good thing. Actually, I want to take this a step back. I don't want to think about how to address the person who's struggling. I want to actually switch roles here, because let's say you have two people here and they're having a conversation, and one person says something, and this person on the receiving end, this message is in a certain format, which is the rate and the tone and the word choice and the whatever it is that this person has the ability to express. And when I say has the ability, part of the frustration in communication too is when we are formulating our messages and expressing them vocally or in written form or anything, it will never be 100% accurate to what is happening on the inner parts, because we truly cannot convey that amount of information, that quality of information. It is such an experiential thing to think a thought or feel your own feelings, and it is so personal. And while there may be indicators on the outside that people can recognize, like if I'm like, like bawling my eyes out, I mean, that's so obvious that I'm really having a rough time. That is one of the functions of tears. That is one of the functions, because people will see it. It's obvious. It is an action. It is a behavior. It's on the outer parts. It signals something. That's a piece of information. And plus, like, as creatures, as like the way that we are so in tune with these patterns, that empathy is abundant in the human species. There are times where it seems like that being closed thing happens in that area as well. And so when people don't seem receptive, it could be for so many reasons. It is not just because they are dumb or that they're ignoring or that they don't care, which might be the real quick explanation somebody could give themselves, because they don't want to hurt their own. They're going to just say, oh, well, you just obviously can't understand this. It is, I think, a more beneficial, there's a beneficial way to like address these situations, and it would really mean finding out from that person a few key factors. Okay, what perspective they are coming from can be helpful. Like if they've only ever grown up in a certain region of the world, let's say like let's just say like the desert. They grew up in the desert. They've always lived in the desert. And somebody new is coming into town talking about snow. And, let's just say for a moment that like this person in the desert, they don't really discuss snow in school because it's not relevant information to them. And they heard some old story about snow from their grandparents, but they didn't really understand what the grandparents were trying to say, because they thought that the grandparents were just like loony or whatever, as a lot of people will often just conclude and move on. The problem with making these conclusions at all is that you're closing that door to receive actually the meaning in this message. Thinking about translating into different languages and building on this concept that the way that we express ourselves is so very different, and even saying the exact words from two different people can mean two different things. Saying the exact meaning in many different ways, it still holds the same meaning, right? Different languages is a great example, because they're literally different languages, but people even speaking the same language will use different vernacular to try to make their best attempt. And their ability to truly convey it may be limited for so many reasons. They can be standing in their own way, or they can perhaps not have the right words, or maybe there's something else interfering with the processing that is making it difficult to just get it out, If you're standing on hot coals and someone's asking you a complex question, I doubt that is the time that you're going to be able to answer that complex question. The more urgent priority in your own version of the human experience is like, fuck, my feet are on fire. I need to move. I need to get out of here. I don't have the time to answer this question. And that is rational. You need to take care of yourself. I think that we can hold it against people when they misunderstand and get really frustrated and start to internalize to believe that that must mean that what you're saying to them that they're not understanding must be a bad thing or not right, or, you know, what have you. We could conclude any number of things about that. A lot of times we take it so personally that we believe that our words are us, as if we've attached ourselves to these expressions, and the expression itself is proof or verification of our existence. And to a certain extent, I can see how that does function as a thing, because validation is going to feel so good for us. When something matches the internal, it's like ding, 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 ding. Yeah, good job. You did it. You're right. You are valid. You are included. We understand you. I see you. I hear you. We're connecting. And so that connection heart to heart is where trust is coming into the equation. If you don't trust someone for whatever reason, even if it's based on information that is false or anything, remember, this is your interpretation. The person themselves, many people could say, oh, I don't trust that person. I don't trust that person. It's just the more that people are vocalizing and getting that ding, ding, ding on this idea, the more we see it as, oh, truth, right? It could have been a long course of rumors about this person, and it is possible that nobody actually knows this person. You know, it is possible that nobody has even broken through that barrier of the internal versus external. When people are safe to speak their truth, and when I say their truth, this is an important part. We're out here arguing about the truth, and questions on reality and perception of reality need to be considered here, because there is no universal interpretation. If we're taking it in through all of these 100% unique codes of DNA, let's just reduce a human being to their DNA and just say, if we're looking for the exact match, you're not going to find that. So if we can scientifically agree that that is a fact, right? Okay, so we're talking about facts, truth, evidence, right? This is very tangible, and this is why there's an argument between religion and science. Because for some, that evidence is where they're starting from. That evidence is their belief. Even though there are sensations within that may be giving them information that they do not have the ability to factualize in written data and whatever, the way that they allow themselves to interpret that may be different. Something happens where we ourselves question a lot about our own. And so thoughts and ideas and feelings and sensations and observations and whatever information is floating around inside. It's like, for the ones out there who are really struggling to find a sense of solidity, and they're looking for answers, and they have so many questions, and really what they're looking for is someone who's able to translate or be able to speak their language enough so that they can create connection, because connections really help us to grow. But if we're battling ourselves on if it is okay, or if this is relevant or important, or if there's value in what we have to share, or, oh no, this question's going to sound stupid, I shouldn't say it, or, oh no, I want so-and-so to think that I'm cool, so I'm just going to refrain from voicing this thing that I think I really actually want to say, but because the interpretation of what they would like will alter what we decide to say. And I do definitely, it's another form of accommodation. Sometimes people do have very high sensitivities to certain topics. They may have experienced trauma. They may have just came from war. They may have been, they just might have been dumped or lost their job. And I mean, those are such sensitive events that universally we can understand is a highly stressful time, all of it. So we almost can empathize more that, that they deserve the accommodation, justify why we would alter what we choose to say because this person is hurting or sensitive, or, some people can't even do that, which is like, I mean, it's all to each their own. I think that the thing about it is, like, a lot of times what we interpret what people are saying as, if we allow them to speak their truth, just allow it, just like listen, take it in, and then before concluding on anything, really take a moment to consider where they're coming from. What knowledge do they hold? Do we know this person? I mean, because if you don't know, you're going to be missing a lot of information. You can ask questions to gain clarity. You can ask more questions, because the acquisition of knowledge is only a benefit to us. There is no harm in knowledge, in understanding. You gain understanding, it's going to continuously just add another facet, another viewpoint, another piece of the puzzle. And a long time ago, like, I had this this great metaphor for what this would be. I was reading The Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. I was young, so I mean, but it really did make an improvement on my ability to take perspectives. This is a book, ancient text, and it just talks really a lot into so many different topics. Oh my God, Nagarjuna. I don't know, I might be really butchering that name in how I'm pronouncing it or whatever, but if you are interested, maybe I can like share a link or something to the text. But there is explanation even very early on in times when, like, we didn't have access to so many forms of information that we do today, but still these realizations were abundant, so I'm hoping that something about the pattern. I'll bring it back. But Nagarjuna, okay, Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. This was what really taught me about the presence of more than one truth. Like, it doesn't mean that one is right and one is wrong. That is such a black and white and rigid, narrow version of thinking. That is such closed-minded thinking. If we could abandon the ideas of just black, just white, the black and white provide us the understanding of the contrast, but there are spectrums to every single thing, and we actually are not even static on our ideas or beliefs. If we are holding true to that, if we hold on to that belief, like there's no tomorrow, and we just want it, we create the rigidity. We don't allow ourselves the flexibility to shift, but we're also hindering ourselves from growth when we're doing that. And it could be such a protective thing that, maybe you lost everything you had, and the only thing that you could grasp onto was that thing, and you hold it because it symbolizes everything that you've been through, or maybe it symbolizes something else to you. But to learn is not to abandon the prior knowledge that we've had. Learning really is building more and more off of the foundation we've created for ourselves. It can expand in any direction. It can circle back and kind of repair the earlier foundational stuff. It can revise and edit and improve those things. And it's not that you're wrong or bad if your belief turns out to be not exactly a match to what is needed or what incoming information better suits you. I mean, again, with the perspectives, think about how much we're growing throughout time, and think about that perspective. Okay, this is a factor in our understanding at all times. If you were a young person and you could only perceive through such a limited perspective, that will influence how you remember the information even as an older person. Because when the information was acquired and when it broke through that barrier from external internal, and we accepted it in and made sense of it and solidified it somewhere inside of ourselves in that knowledge body, it's like, it was through that time, through that perspective. So going back to do those revisions is a helpful thing. But I find that, like, in the case of trauma, these kinds of things are just quick, like, it's almost like the eject button on a plane that is about to crash into the ocean. Your engines are failing, and everything's red and blinking and screaming at you, and you hit eject. It is a safety measure. It is going to save you. That is how trauma functions. Traumatic experiences that have done this for us, have pushed that eject button, a lot of times will leave big, great gaps in the information. Our only sense of safety, it does preserve us, but it creates new challenges then in the future as we move forward, still alive because of thankfully, the ability to survive, however that looks. And so there can be huge mental blocks on people's ways of accessing the inner. If it doesn't get in, they're not going to understand. If it doesn't break through that barrier, they won't receive. They're not absorbing. They're not receptive. It's just like a lot of times repelling. A lot of times this is why people argue about what is right or what we should do, or, and especially as the collective is facing this like crucial time in our political climate. And so many recent things are happening that are abundant in our day-to-day. Like, even though I am not at the White House right now, it still affects me, and it affects the people I know and am talking to, and it does influence so much about our day-to-day. So if we're really struggling with the day-to-day, sometimes taking the steps back to understand what factors are coming into play here can be helpful, because you don't have to assume responsibility, like full responsibility for the level of dread that you are experiencing when all these factors are coming from elsewhere. If we are able to recognize how that affects us, we can narrow it down and really focus back in on our personal locus of control, our personal beliefs, our personal self, because including all of these events or situations or thoughts or feelings about the situations, it can definitely create more of a complexity, more of a like a static in our reception to reality. It's going to create that tone that you're, or like a lens that you're looking through, a filter. It's having an influence on what you're receiving, even if that information is not even seemingly related. Setting the tone. The person who is deaf has a condition, but if we consider our own emotions as a condition, let's just think about how that may change the interpretation of what is presented to us. Because if you're in an emotional state where you're heightened arousal and just like upset and unpleasant and struggling and in distress, and your physiology is responding, and all of these things are like kind of working in cahoots to create the situation as a whole. It's like, okay, I know I jump around a lot on these topics, but it's just, we need to understand where is our realm of actual, where are we in this equation? We can absorb so much more than is ours, and I think this is really back to the empathy, back to the sign of caring. We do care. We really do. We cannot exhaust more energy than we are capable of at any given day, and all of that stuff changes on the day-to-day. But I guess what I'm coming back and trying to say is, like, when there's a misunderstanding, or we're not sure, or we're assuming things, or judging people, or all of this stuff, there's so much more to it than just what we think. If we can expand on our ability to take different perspectives, by listening to the stories of others and really working to translate them for ourselves in a way that makes sense to us. And if people in the communicating position are able to recognize the perspectives and recognize how there may be a discrepancy in what is in the form of what's being said, the meaning underneath doesn't have to change. You can still deliver the meaning, but in a different way, or using different words, or by relating it back to relevant information that this person does already know. So like, I found that like it's so helpful if I know that a person, for example, my own kids, my son is like super into Minecraft. Minecraft has become the format for a lot of lessons in life that has not everything to do with Minecraft, but he understands that as a metaphorical medium. I can use this to help him to understand life. For people in whatever specialization, typically if they are a specialist in any field, a great amount of their knowledge body is relating back to this topic or field or subject or whatever. If they have a long history of doing all these things, I mean, just to know a person helps us to connect more. When you know someone and you know these pieces of information, it can be so helpful in the connection. If a person is telling you things that you don't comprehend, to be able to understand how we ourselves are limited, they themselves are limited. There are so many things, there's so much more to it than just the words themselves. To think about all of that can really allow us forgiveness. It can allow us patience. It can allow us to be more flexible, and it can pave that way for the understanding a lot easier than keeping this rigid structure that cannot budge and will refuse anything that doesn't match directly in line. And there are certain areas, certain time frames in our lives where developmentally this makes sense. Recently I was thinking about the period of life where we're going through hormonal changes in the course of puberty. And it's I know from my studies in psychology, the developmental process, I mean, there's so many different psychologists who came up with maps to just kind of express this. None of them are necessarily wrong or whatever. Some things have been maybe outdated, but remember the perception of that time, and will explain why there are other contextual factors that can help us to understand why. And this is why it comes back to history as well, because this is what history is about. It is not about, oh my God, the way that I learned history. Memorize facts, memorize names, memorize dates, memorize all this shit, memorize. Memorizing anything. I can try my best to just regurgitate something, but it doesn't even have to necessarily penetrate the inner. There's no understanding there. So history needs to be understood, not just memorized, the way that we understand is in reference to what we actually already know. So if we are talking about events that are current and happening today, and learning about history simultaneously, it can really help us to understand the potential of why this is important, and also give us information on how we can proceed in a beneficial way.
Plug in my tablet.
Oh my gosh, for goodness sake. Okay.